Welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me, and today, a very, very special guest, someone different than we normally talk to, the LinkedIn satirist, newsletter writer, and coach, Jack Kuveke. Did I pronounce that correct, Jack?
More or less, Jack Kuveke, but I'm going to be honest, I just need to slash the E off the end. Unfortunately, I was born with this dummy. I can't get rid of it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said that like I cared what you thought. Not just kidding. Moving forward, see, that was my natural roll into a comical show. This will be a little different than usual.
Beautiful. I love it.
Awesome. So you have an exciting background. Before we get to kind of the character you portray and the satirist, kind of walk us through how you got there.
Yeah, so I've been in the tech industry for about a decade now. I got my start building Minecraft servers. Originally wanted to be a comedy writer, and then I built Minecraft servers with like 1 million users. So that got me into tech. I went on to work at the first gaming cryptocurrency. I raised the largest ICO in the world out of my dorm room when I was 19. We raised a $53 million ICO. So I did whatever 19-year-old does. I dropped out of college and moved to Belgrade, Serbia with a team of 150 other Serbian engineers. And
That's
I was the only American on the team. That blew up in my face, like most things that I do, and came back a sadder, poorer, disgruntled version of myself, an unemployable 21-year-old who is an expert at building communities and in an industry that was now defunct and bankrupt, more or less. And I ended up working at a startup accelerator. And then I started a couple of companies after that and got really good at raising venture capital. And so my fun job is writing a satire newsletter and shit posting on the internet. And my other job of how I pay the bills is I work with early stage startup founders to help them raise money.
No, that's awesome. And I've got to say, I'm a legitimate fan of Jack's. We'll talk about the newsletter later more, but it is a fun read, and I love getting it twice a week, I believe.
Yep.
See, that I'm legit. I actually watch it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're aware of this or not. I always tag you. I steal honestly, but I steal your memes all the time and repost them. Again, I always tag you because I'm not that guy, but his stuff's funny.
Oh, thank you, my friend. And you know, that's the fun thing about like one thing I think I've got a good kind of like mindset for social media, because I kind of don't care if people like take stuff, repost things. I assume everyone on the internet's kind of a gremlin. I appreciate you and people like you, Gary, for like reposting and content and whatever. But I have like a lot of friends who get their like posts like stolen and stuff. And I honestly am just like, I don't read enough social media to even know if it's stolen. I kind of just post and ghost, and I'm like a selfish gremlin. I only like read my stuff. And then if like you send me stuff, I'm happy to comment and would love to support, but I just don't read enough to even care. Ironically, I spend all my time making social media posts, but I would like to engage on social media as little as humanly possible. So like people steal stuff, I'm like, oh, whatever. What am I supposed to do? You know?
The hilarious part of that and the similarity is it would appear that I'm on LinkedIn 25 hours a day because
Sure.
I schedule my posts and then I come in for 15 minutes. I go out and do real work and come back. But the biggest irony for me is, as active as I am on social media for work, best of luck finding anything personal. I have zero interest in talking about my kids or what I did over the weekend. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not in those places. I'm there. I just don't ever do anything with it.
It's probably for the best. It's probably why you have such a jovial personality and you don't seem like you're on, like teetering on the edge of a mental crisis. That's probably why, Gary.
You know, I'll tell you what I appreciate most about your content is that I've been in the business space for, like 25, 30 years now. And people take themselves so seriously to such a level of smug. It's difficult to interact with them. You know, they just made an app that counts birds or, you know, just some meaningless thing that'll be gone before the day is done. And they act as though they just solved cancer. And having somebody on place as dry as LinkedIn typically is, with an actual sense of humor, who doesn't mind poking fun, but most importantly for me, understands the underlying business is much needed.
Yeah, I think I've never understood why everyone takes things so seriously, because life is like so abstractly crazy and doesn't make sense to begin with. Like, look at our political situation. That's a joke. The fact that like we're on a spinning rock that's like held together by gravity is hilarious. You know, no one knows how we got here or what what the future holds for us. And I think I just kind of take every day as like, let's try and have fun because we're going to just like probably blow up in a solar flare someday. So like, let's not take anything too seriously. And I think the not taking things seriously makes the outcome way easier,
Yes.
because when we're so uptight about like how we're perceived and whether or not we're successful and the money we make, nothing is going to go our way. Even the successes I've had, Jabroni Capital started on a random viral note. I had no idea. I wasn't even expecting to start a newsletter or to do a satire account or to start writing jokes on the internet. It just kind of happened one day. So it's like nothing is predictable. So you might as well just like not take anything too seriously, and it will make your life way, way better and way easier.
Yes, and you can laugh and joke at things and not take yourself too seriously and still understand the ramifications of your choices. And, if you're leading a company that's growing and has employees that you have responsibilities to, you could still fulfill that need without, again, acting as though you weren't walking into a funeral home every day with this dour expression.
Yeah, and whether or not you like someone like Elon Musk, he's currently the most successful entrepreneur of the last, like, what, I don't know, like since Da Vinci potentially.
Yeah.
And that guy is like completely unserious, but also serious. And I think, it's a good frame of reference. And I think it's given a lot of people, you know, that like me hope. Again, whether or not you like him as a person or agree with him, yada, 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 it doesn't really matter. It's just a good reference of like, you can be the most successful person on the planet and still take things not seriously and be taken as a really legitimate person, which is great.
Exactly. And that kind of segues a little bit to something I'd like to talk to you about, because Elon Musk, again, whether you like him or not, which these days seems to be more of a political persuasion question than anything else,
Sure.
he can be funny and then immediately switch gears and dive deep into a topic, making it very clear that he knows his business and what he's all about. You have Jabroni Capital, which is your satire account, and you also have your funding coaching business, which I got to believe when people are looking at VC funding, they're not thinking funny, haha. So how do you balance that tightrope between being the smartass that everybody loves in Jabroni Capital and someone that needs to be taken seriously when they're looking to get their seed round?
Yeah, it's great. Great question. I think there's two things. One thing that plays to my favor is the fundraising coaching business is not something I would like to do long term. So it's something that I view as like an interim project as I get this media business off the ground transparently. And I'll tell anyone, I tell my clients, like, it's something I have a lot of fun with. I get to work with really great founders. It gives me eyes into the industry while I'm not building anything myself right now. So there's a lot of benefits to doing it, but it's not something I see myself doing long term. And I think most people that do fundraising coaching would actually say something pretty similar to that. So that's one thing that plays to my favor. I think the second thing is because the startup experience is so miserable, they're the people that, like, everyone who's the most miserable or suffered the most appreciates comedy the most, objectively speaking. It's right why the
I agree.
Jewish community have been the best comedians, why so many comedians were like legitimate Holocaust survivors that saw these atrocities, because levity made their life easier and they got to see the nuance of life and laugh even in the darkest moments. So I think my client base struggles so much, and the things I talk about are things they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, that it builds legitimacy in their eyes. And while a lot of other people might think I'm a joke and not take me seriously, that's actually kind of good because I want to be a joke and like I want to grow my newsletter account. But the people that I want to pay me and to hire me for what I'm doing, they need the humor. And it lets them know, and I've heard this now dozens of times, where they're like, you must know what you're talking about because you did the satire about this topic, whether it's fundraising or venture capital hiring an associate or how an investor behaves in a meeting. You're just talking about that in such a real way, in a nuanced way, that you must know what you're talking about. So I think that the answer is that it plays to my audience. And then the third point of why I think it works for me is they know that I'll be fun. That like when they talk to me, the second thing they're going to get is it's not going to be just like a boring consultancy meeting. The same way that I am on online trying to make people laugh, I'm trying to make my clients laugh. And like our text message exchanges get wild. People like they send me fucking funny memes. They're like, "Can you believe what this person said? Can you believe how this investor responded? I'm thinking about you right now." So like they get that sounding board and they get that personality along with the advice that I give.
That's awesome. You said a couple things I'd like to touch on. The one thing being how tough it is as a founder and it being almost a form of therapy. It reminds me, so I was a big fan of Richard Pryor back in the day, old school Eddie Murphy. And all those old comics, once they killed whatever demons they had inside, they weren't funny anymore. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that comedy came from a place of pain. And once they resolved that, they just weren't funny anymore. And so I can really see from an inverse perspective how, as a founder going through a tough time, that having some humor can really help to pull that away.
Yeah, it's. I think one thing I call myself is like an optimistic cynic. So I'm very optimistic about life, but I'm very cynical and skeptical about almost everything. And I try and keep that going because I think it makes you more funny and you notice patterns and you make analogies that you otherwise wouldn't. So like I laugh, I try and laugh at the darkness and like channel inner pain and things I'm still working on because I agree with you. I think the complexity of human character and what the reason that people are funny, it's because they're really messed up inside.
For sure. I don't mean that as a shot, but for sure. The other thing I love about your comedy, and we talked about it a little bit already, is that you know the business. So um, if you've been around the business scene at all, if you look at depictions of business and media, it's always super negative, comes from a mean-spirited place. Some of my favorite business shows like House of Lies, which follows a management consulting pod with Don Cheadle, obviously Silicon Valley. They were funny, but everyone is depicted as kind of, at best, a scumbag or an incompetent, at worst, outright evil. Your humor, though, it's got a bite. It comes from a place of love. It doesn't seem to have that same mean spirited core that popular media gives us.
Yeah, I think the trick to that is I make fun of myself. And I try and what I know sometimes I'll dig at other people or like something I see. I try to only do that in the newsletter and I try to only do it to people that will never see it and are so unbelievably rich that like the things other people are saying things that are like so much worse.
Yes.
But I think the beauty about what I do is I try and make myself the butt of the joke and I don't want to like personally offend anyone. I don't like hurting people's feelings
Yeah.
ever. I'm not that kind of person. Um, I think that comes across that way. And all the scenarios I'm talking about are made up. They're based off of real things. They're based off observations, but it's all fake. I would never like be like Gary sucks. Here's a story about why Gary sucks. And so I think I do try and come out of it from a place of like love and appreciation. I love this industry, but I deeply hate it as well.
Yes.
It's like my toxic ex-girlfriend. And so it comes from a place of like, well, the sex is amazing, but like my God, like we fight all the time and I just can't stand when she does this one thing. Uh, And I think that that's what makes it entertaining.
Yeah, the startup, especially the funded startup ecosystem, that is a great example of it. But you know, you're right. As I look back at your material, it tends to be pretty self-referential, and when you're taking shots. Now, I'm a Gen Xer and a former Marine sergeant, so pointed humor is the language I speak. So I
Yeah.
feel like you're almost an honorary Gen Xer in that regard. Do you find that younger folks who tend, and I don't mean this as a generalization, who tend to be a bit thinner skinned about that stuff, do they tend to resonate as well as we do? Or
I think so. I think it's kind of. I think the tides are turning. I think so. I'm 27 now. And so I'm like on the very end of Gen Z. So I think I like between like end of Gen Z, started like end of millennial, something like that. And so I think that my generation grew up with like the video online video game era. They said the worst possible things. Like that's what I grew up with. Like middle school was brutal. The words being thrown around, the jokes being made. That's kind of what we grew up on. And I think we've lived in this period where everyone kind of repressed those desires and like pushed that down. But in reality, that was kind of the foundation of what we laughed at when we were kids. Like we grew up with movies like Tropic Thunder, right? Like that was, you couldn't make that today. That was the best comedy that we grew up with. So I think that my generation and younger folks, it appeals to them, but they've kind of been pushed this narrative by mainstream media of like what's acceptable to talk about. And behind closed doors, I think everyone kind of jokes in the same way. And I think I hear this again, there's something I hear all the time is you're just saying things everyone is thinking. So I think the Gen Z audience does like it. Some of them get a little bit more PC, but I actually find that it generally is like millennials who get the most offended. Generally speaking, it's like that. But they're also the people that pushed like the woke mainstream, like you can only joke about certain things agenda down everyone's throats. And I
Yeah.
think basically every other generation of people, Gen Xers, boomers, the nihilistic zoomers who are like, everything's made up, I just vape all the time, and like we're going to go to war with Russia, like they don't really care. It's only really millennials that were like pushing that agenda, and they won for like 10 or 15 years. But I think the tides are turning and everyone's just like, dude, like we got to laugh and it's not that serious. We don't have to take things, so personally.
The irony in that is, again, when I was a kid, we said the most objectively awful things to each other face to face. If you pushed too far, you knew because you were swallowing your teeth, because
Right.
it was all face to face. So you learn that social grace on account of not wanting to swallow teeth. And it's interesting you say millennials. I feel like in our country, especially, there seems to be an attraction to the next generation shitting on the older generation and vice versa. But there also seems to be that the primary characteristic of the next generation is the biggest overcorrection from the last generation. So like Gen X, we were the feral kids that had no supervisions whatsoever. So what did we do when we had kids? We helicopter parented them and gave them too much attention because it's what we didn't get. So yeah, I wonder if Gen Z are going to be the same flavor of rabid that Gen X was.
I think so, and I think it'll even be the generation 5 to 10 years younger than me will be even crazier because they're growing up fully online. They can see everything. They've got videos of people getting like decapitated and then like having sex on Twitter, right? Like that's social media. They can go from like literally any street, all the spectrums they've had access to since they were like 11. So I think they're going to be the most effective. And I don't mean to even be like, I feel bad for millennials because I think they were the generation told like, be a good person, get a corporate job, pay $300,000 for college, you'll be able to buy a house and things are going to be great, and say these things. And this is like how you be a proper put together human being. And then that was all bullshit. So I think that it's so hard for people to get over the fact that they've been living a lie. And we all live lies. That's not like you and I are still doing that today. It's up to us like to self-actualize and figure out what lies we are living. But I think the millennial generation, especially, they were just sold a bill of goods that was like totally phony. And to rectify that and to come to that like self-awareness, like, oh, this is all made up, is really hard. So I think they're going through that now. I wish them well. This isn't all millennials, but I think it's just like a cultural thing that happened with their generation.
Yeah.
And then Gen Z is screwed for a whole host of other reasons. So,
what you said that really resonated. Now I just have to do it. When you were talking about social media, all I could see was some Gen Z kid going, Bluey, Bluey, beheading, Bluey.
Yeah. Yes.
But going back to that generational thing, what's interesting, and we've gotten a little bit of field, and I apologize, I have a completely nonlinear mind. So the message I learned from my parents from watching them as they, working in the same job for 15, 20 years was that you get a job and you keep it. Even as I grew up, that was no longer true for me. But because it's the truth of what I learned from watching my parents, it's the truth I taught my kids, who are millennials and Gen Z, that's what they should do. Even though as I was living it, it was no longer true for me. So when they experienced it, the lie that I gave them, which obviously wasn't intentional, was what I'd experienced watching my parents. So it's kind of crazy how we train wreck the next generation.
We always do, though.
Yeah.
Like that's just like everyone's going to be messed up, but just in different ways. And I think I feel grateful. My parents were entrepreneurs and they did their own thing. So I grew up watching them have small businesses and grow them, and they talk really openly about that experience. So I think it always was in my mind that I would do my own thing and I would be an entrepreneur. And I feel really grateful for that. The flip side of that is they're more fear-based, where they had to like make all their money, and they didn't come from money. And so they were like, you can't like self-identify, you can't wear like wacky t-shirts, you have a crew cut, you wear polos, and you like prim and proper, you're polite, you have the best manners in the game, and you help everyone more than they help you. And I think that was a problem for like self-identification that I had to like learn to be like authentically present myself to the world. And that was a struggle. But like, you're dealt the cards you have, and I'm really grateful for pretty much everything else they gave me. So I think all you can do is just like look at your life and be like, well, you know, I'm a big boy or big girl now, and I can figure my own stuff out and realize what's authentic to myself. And it's up to me to just like play the cards that I have and not be ungrateful.
That was a disgustingly mature take on that from a comedian. So
Yeah,
I agree with everything you said, mind you. I mean, you just described what growing up is supposed to be. You know,
sure.
you take the things that are good and you reject the things that are bad, and you map your path out of that data set. But yeah, I'm going to circle back to the comedy. What I love
Please.
most by far is that you clearly get it and that you're still funny. I see you in two places. I see you on LinkedIn. I see you in your newsletter. I'm recently entering X, even though I don't love social media. I've seen you there, but I just don't do much on X, so I don't have a ton of experience. Where else can people find you? Are there any other platforms where you do work?
Yeah, Twitter, all everything is under the name Jabroni Capital or Jack Kuveke, my name that they'll see in the notes. But I think, yeah, other than that, Instagram, Twitter, and jabronicapital.com, those are the two best places to find me.
So, with your newsletter, do you ever? And I know the newsletter; it's relatively young. I signed up for it. I want to say about a month ago, and I feel like I was pretty early stage.
Mhm.
Do you get any prospect flow from the newsletter to your coaching company, or is that two separate animals?
No, I get a lot of work in business through the newsletter now. It wasn't always that way. So I started the newsletter. So a quick history for you on this. So I did my first silly post announcing I had a fake fund called Jabroni Capital in like the very end of last year, and it
Oh,
immediately
okay.
went viral. And so I started a newsletter technically then, but it was like kind of sporadic. It was very long form, and I didn't do it that consistently. And so it's really been the last 3 months or maybe like 10 to 12 weeks, something like that, that I've really been going all in and been like, I got to do this twice a week or I'll die. That's the hardline rule. And for me, it's now gotten to the point where wasn't really getting tons of clients and referrals. It was just a labor of love, getting some good feedback from a few subscribers I did have. But now I'm actually like starting to sell sponsorships. I had a bunch of people reach out to me to pay to be in the newsletter, and I'll promote my own products and get like 10, 20 meetings with prospective clients off that every time I post, which is awesome. Like that's like dream scenario if I can basically do whatever the hell I want and say no to anyone that I don't appreciate working with and just use my own platform to get clients. I mean, like that's literally the dream. That's what we all want to do as independent entrepreneurs. So I'm just starting to get clients from it now and turn on monetization. So I'm feeling super grateful and very excited for the next, 6 months or so.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I came across you first, if memory serves. I think you had made a comment, a snarky comment on, I believe it was Sebastian Spitzer's
Sure.
one of his posts, and he and I engage a fair amount on LinkedIn. And I thought it was funny, and then it went away, and then it happened again, and then the third time I'm like, who is this guy? And so I started following you, and then I saw a post your newsletter. I was like, oh great, my 315th newsletter. That's never
Yeah.
going to happen. And then I kept finding you funny. I finally subscribed to the newsletter, and it was legitimately funny every time. Because let's be honest, we all sign up to 5 newsletters a week and then read one every other month. But yours I consistently open because it's consistently funny.
I appreciate that. It's really hard. I like that. I was supposed to get one out yesterday. I was coming back from, funny. I had a influencer friend call me last minute and was like, "Hey, do you want to come to Lollapalooza? I'll fly you out here and put us in a suite." And I was like, I don't really do music festivals, but I'm now in this like now I'm trying to just always talk about funny things, and I'm like, this is content. I'll
Yeah.
do it. So I flew out to Chicago last week and had this fun experience with her. But I was like coming back from just like a week of just being around like the craziest people on the planet, like dancing and listening to music, being in the sun all day long. And yesterday morning, I was like, I got to write a newsletter. I don't even know what's going on in the world. And like, I don't know how to be funny right now. And so I basically just struggled the last 24 hours to get something out. And then, like, lo and behold, put the newsletter out today. And I was like, that might be my best one yet. So it's really funny. It's one of these things where it's really hard The only thing I could recommend to anyone who's trying to be funny consistently is you just have to sit down and do it. And I'm not funny all the time. I'm my own biggest critic. And like I go back and read stuff. I'm like, that was pretty good. Like that was, I love that. But it's very sweet of you. I'm glad it resonates. I'm glad you find it funny. But it's really just you kind of just have to get up and try day after day and slam your head into your keyboard.
There's a YouTube fitness influencer / comic called Dom Mazzetti. And
Yes.
he had a channel. Have you ever seen him?
Oh, I was a big Dom Mazzetti fan.
Dude, I was just going to say, it shows you've got the same vibe for business that he does for the gym. So he's got another channel. He's got another clothing line called NAR RPM. Same vibe, same energy. A little bit less New Jersey Italian, a little bit more LA fashion dude. But you've got that same energy in business that he does for Gym Bros Gym Life.
Oh, that's amazing to hear, because the old OG Bro Science Life videos from like 7 to 10 years ago, I watched all of them like a dozen times with my brother. I was a huge fan of sketch comedy growing up. Me and I have an identical twin brother who I live with, and we would just be engaged in bits all day long. We were just assuming characters, doing wacky voices, and stuff like Dom Mazzetti, like Bro Science Life. That was all I lived for. And just like honestly, the dream is I would like to start doing more and more sketch comedy stuff like that, because that is, I recently came up with a sketch and was whiteboarding it out of a dad teaching his kids how to properly drink and drive. And that and I was just like, this is doing dumb sketches and being silly. Like that's the dream. So that's very sweet of you. Thank you. That's an awesome callback.
I'll tell you, dude. So this podcast is both on YouTube for the video portion, then, wherever you find podcasts, all the audio stuff. And I get the most traction, believe it or not, on YouTube, which I guess when you got all this, of course. But if you can pull off physical comedy the way you do written comedy, I can't stress enough. I think you'd rock on YouTube. That would be.
That's the goal. That's 2025 goal is it's been a delicate part of the reason I want to get out of fundraising coaching is so they can just do content full time, because the fundraising coaching, while great, it just is really time consuming and energy draining. And I want to just do silly things and do like sketch comedy and stuff in person, because that's my entire childhood summed up in, a decade of just watching dumb things on YouTube. So 2025 goal, Gary, hold me to it. That's really what I have to do it. And I'll send you some stuff and you let me know if it's dumb and funny, because you clearly have a good sense of humor.
I will definitely do that. And I'll say, switching gears a little bit back to the business side, for 7 years, I did management consulting, sales, and recruiter training, and it is draining. I don't know what it's like to be a psychiatrist. Anytime I've been in an office, it's obviously been on the other side of the desk. But I imagine it's like that, in that you take seriously the success of your client. And so you pour everything into that, only to have them show up 15 minutes late, unprepared, and need to leave early. But that's super, super exhausting.
It is. And I think I have great clients that I'm really fortunate to work with. And I have some not so great clients along the way. I think I don't work with them anymore.
Talking to you, Bob. No.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the reason it's draining is, even with the good ones, you're just, you have to be on for like whatever hour you're with someone, you have to be really on it. And then after it ends, you're getting texts and email follow-ups and whatever from these people. And you're constantly context switching. And then you're trying to remember, like, does this person have this problem, or does this person have this problem? I've got a book of 10 people I'm talking to every week, and another 20 more I'm trying to sell to. And so you're constantly flipping between them. And the reality is, like I said earlier, these people are struggling. So their energy is often just like, things aren't good, Jack. I'm like, oh boy, all right. And I'm trying to like perk them up and be their hype man, which I appreciate. I think it's an important role, and I really try and do my best. But you're shouldering a lot of pain for people and a lot of struggle, and also you're shouldering other people, for lack of a better term, fucking up, like just making boneheaded decisions, and you're like, oh God, why did you do that? We talked about this. Don't do that. Stop, please. Stop what you're doing. But that's the reality. You get it from consulting. You can't control people's decisions and their outcomes, and you can't control their energy.
Yeah, I used to get most of my business from speaking at conventions and conferences. And it was a good time. I don't want to cry about how awful it was. It was pretty great, beautiful locations, lots of booze, adequate food. You know, it was a good time. So you go up there on stage, talk to anywhere from 50 to a few hundred people, um, and you would feel when you get off the stage like you'd run a marathon. Then you leave the stage, and if you're a smart speaker, then you always ended it in a way that continued engagement. So people who are interested in the topic would come up to you to talk more about it, also known as prospects, and you'd work with them. But most of like the real selling and deal making would happen at the after parties, and most of the contacts you'd make would happen at the networking breakfasts. So you'd be on stage and speak for an hour or so. You get a downtime of 1 or 2 hours during the day. You'd be at the after parties till 1, 2 in the morning. Then up at 6 to be at the networking breakfasts. 5 days later, you're like, dead, like dead.
Yes, totally. Totally. And my schedule is different, but it's similar in the sense that like I wake up and I have to write. So I write the second I wake up in the morning, and then by 11 I'm like I have to go start to doing calls with clients or my business partner, going over our pipeline. And then the afternoons I got to coach people, but then somewhere in between I got to like post on LinkedIn, and then I kind of have to engage for the first hour on LinkedIn for that to
Yep.
go well. And then now I'm trying to grow on Instagram and social media and whatever, and like I have to go make Instagram and social media content, which I'm terrible at. I've never had an Instagram or a Facebook or whatever until very recently, and so now I'm like I have to figure that out. So it's and then again, if you have like someone, and then you have rescheduling. Oh God, that's the worst with like consulting is people like, hey, so I know we were supposed to talk in 2 minutes. Can we reschedule to like this afternoon? And I look at my afternoon and I'm like, no. But also all the rest of my afternoons are absolutely gone this week. I don't know when I'm supposed to talk to you.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I had to write into my agreements that our time is from top of hour to 45 minutes after. And if you come late, that's your time. And if you reschedule day of, if I can, I will. If we can't, it doesn't happen.
Totally. I
Because,
think
yeah,
I need
it
to do
just,
that as well.
yeah. And you don't want to be
And
that guy, and I accommodate when I can, but you can't run a business that way.
no, I think that's something I'm a very accommodating person by nature. I think like I tend towards that. It's probably like has something to do with being a twin. You know, you're like constantly accommodating this other person you're attached to the hip to. But I think something I've really learned in the last couple of years is you being accommodating only hurts you because you just seem like you're like always accessible and that you're willing to just like throw away your time, and that when you demand more, you're more busy. It's just like dating. When you're less available, you're more attractive. And I tell people that ironically all day long for fundraising, but like it's very hard to follow your advice in all categories of life.
Especially that one, because there's a balancing act as a service provider. You want to resolve your client's problem, but to your point, you've got other things to do as well. And it sounds like you as well, but for me, I'm passionate about the startup and small business community. I legitimately believe that we're the engine of the economy. I legitimately believe that we're the origin of the majority of innovation. So I'm excited about it. When somebody's got a good idea, I want to do everything I can to help them succeed. The one thing I typically can't help them with, though, is that 6 inches between their ears. And that includes doing your homework and showing up for the session.
Totally. And then something I've been thinking a lot recently is as you become a creator and like have built more of a following. I don't have anything to create. I have like 20,000 followers on LinkedIn. That's my biggest channel. But maybe 30, 40,000 collectively, something like that. But like the amount of people that want to meet with you, and like even I put out a newsletter and I got multiple people being like, hey, I'm in Chicago. I see you're in Chicago. Let's get coffee. And I'm like, I'm not even remotely popular. And like I already have like lots of people like wanting my time, and getting to meet people like you is like legitimately the best. And I love meeting people. And if I could just meet people all day, I would. And if that could just make me bajillions of dollars, great. But like, man, like I don't know how you scale this with time. And like you now, I realize why people are always unavailable when they're famous. I'm like, is everyone wants your time? Everyone wants to meet with you. Everyone's got. I have this hilarious post idea. Like, help me with this. Can you review my deck here? And I just feel so bad being like, I can't review my deck unless you pay me a lot of money. And like,
Yeah.
it feels so icky. But like now, I guess it's just kind of what it is, right? Like if you get successful, and get in demand, you have to just say no a lot.
Well, I'll say, I think the way you scale things that you have to do personally In the 80s, the answer was cocaine. I think for you young pups, it's Zen. I think that's what you
Right.
guys.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I between you and me, Gary, one of my the schemes I have cooking up in my head right now is to do a satirical line of nicotine products. Is legitimately I just think that would be hilarious. So I keep joking about that with my friends. I'm like, how funny would it be if Jabroni Capital launched like a Zin brand? Like it's like that would be so funny to me. I don't know if it'll ever happen. We'll see. But it is really the only thing powering the U.S. economy right now is like nicotine, Adderall, and like energy drinks.
Two things I have to say about that. If you're not there yet, you've got to be on the cusp. But it would be freaking hilarious to have a Jabroni Capital merch line.
Oh yeah,
that would be friggin'. I can't. I know I'd buy stuff. And then the second half of that, I love doing this. I love talking to founders and service providers in the space. I love it. I've always said, when I finally get to a place where I can retire, which I'll never do. My dad's 76, still works full time. I'll never retire.
Yeah.
But when I get to a place where I've got more, not important time, I want to start an after hours podcast for business owners and call it Vodka and Violence and just talk about the war stories, pour a big cocktail and just talk about the silly, stupid shit that we've experienced in our companies.
I think that would be great. I think the more unhinged, and we're all craving this in the entrepreneurial world, is like authentic. And you seem like a really authentic guy, Gary, and I try and be as well. It's just that's what people really want. When you're hanging out with your buddies, your entrepreneur friends or whatever, you're probably getting like fucked up and sloshed, having a couple drinks and being like, dude, Stacy, I wanted to wring her neck out today. Like that's what's authentic. So I think something like that plays well because that's what we all do. We just don't talk about it, and we feel this inherent need that if we talk about it, we'll be seen as unprofessional. But I think the tides are turning, that you can be a little bit more tapered down, a little bit more unhinged, and people will take you seriously because that's what we all are behind closed doors.
I'm going to say this, 100% agree. First of all, authenticity is a superpower. First of all, human beings are great authenticity sniffers. That's why when you bump into some people, you're like, ugh, not what I thought it was, and you get that uncanny valley thing. But the other part of that's I think super important, especially now, especially in service businesses like we have. You're going to work closely with people. I'm not everybody's flavor of vodka. I grew up blue collar. We solve our problems with our hands, generally close into a fist. Not everybody's flavor of vodka. So if we're not going to get along, I'd rather figure it out now than get 2 months into a 9-month contract and we've got 7 months of enduring each other to go.
I couldn't agree more. Part of it, I had an ex-girlfriend once say to me, like, hey, Jack, sometimes when you're at parties or you're at events or something, you can come off as like, people don't get that you're joking right away. Cause I'm like, always like, I start conversations off with like something crazy. I'm like, make up a dumb joke. I say that I'm a Venetian glass blower or something. I say a bunch of bullshit. Right. And, she was like, I've ever thought of like toning that down. And I was like, it's like, the nice thing about it is like, if they don't like that, I totally appreciate it. Like, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but the people who do like me and like are that kind of way, they get the bit and they jump in immediately. And then I have the best night of my life because we're just saying a bunch of nonsense to one another. And it's really fun. So I think like, I'd rather just attract people, and then people over time will probably realize who I am, and more people will like it. But those that still never do, they'll know very quickly that I'm not their cup of tea, and we'll move on and we won't waste time. And I'm a big believer in that. And then the proxy of that, like the outcome, is that I have great relationships. I've got awesome people in my life, and I don't have spend any time with people that I don't like legitimately, I would not be willing to die for, because I'm like, I just don't have time for it.
Yeah. And the beauty of building an authentic personal brand like that is that people know what to expect from you. I don't have to remember the show I put on for you and then show up in that character every time we interact. I'm me. This is what it is. If you don't like it, totally understand. I wish you the best of luck. Please don't talk to me again. Then we move on.
Totally. I'm hoping that that was a bet I had with early on with the whole satire stuff. Like, I do this on my real account. Like, I just started it one day for my actual like LinkedIn account. and had my face and name attached to it. And a lot of people would meet me and be like, "Whoa, this is actually you. I thought it was like a fake photo and a fake name or whatever." And I'm like, "No, this is really me." And the reason I did that and continue to do that is because there's so many people that are trying to do like satire and startup humor or whatever, and the most unhinged people don't attach a face to it. And I stand by my jokes even if some people don't like them, and I would rather the people like you that see it know that I'm a real person and this is really what I stand by it and who I am, than have like some sort of like fake profile and anonymous account where I get to make these jokes and get to be unhinged. So I'm betting that will work out for me long term. It may get me arrested and thrown in jail and like thought crime or something. So, if that
Either way, you
happens,
get 3 meals a day.
yeah, I was going to say have an extra drink for me when that happens, Gary. But um, I'm betting long term that'll get me somewhere.
Yeah, I think it will. Your growth on LinkedIn has been darn near exponential. If I can't catch your post right away, I don't bother commenting because I'm the 97th one. So you're getting engagement and attention. I'd be shocked if you didn't. Like I said, you're one of the only newsletters I always read every time it comes out.
Oh, thank you, Gary. I really appreciate that, man. Seriously.
Speaking of which, is that the best way to get in touch with you, is to subscribe to your newsletter?
Yeah, subscribe to the newsletter and follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn at Jack Kuveke.
Awesome. For people who are catching this in audio, I will include a link to the newsletter in the show notes. So when you get wherever you're going, you can just look up the show notes, leave me a review, and click on that link and sign up for his newsletter. You will not be disappointed. Before we wrap up, anything that you'd like to add, Jack?
You're the man, dude. Thanks for having me. This was really fun. I'm gonna work on getting like full defunct company merch going. So next time we talk, I'm just like I've got like a Theranos vest on. I've got like a Bear Stearns like onesie. I want the whole 9 yards for you.
I think that or go the NASCAR route. Get like a jumper and just patch every one of those things.
That's actually maybe the best idea you've given.
That would be awesome. Well, listen, my friend, I deeply appreciate you coming on the show. It was a blast. I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, anytime, man. Just hit me up.
Awesome. Well, listen, folks, I appreciate you listening to us. Like I'd said, Jack's newsletter link will be in the show notes. Until next week, keep being awesome, keep making awesome things, and don't get arrested. You might bump into Jack.